Hello, Stuffing Guys and Gals. This is Stuffing Guy 912 back with you for another art architecture, this time covering yet another TF2 map after having completed the Ravenholm chapter in the weekly fashion that I started in late September. Keeping in line with the launch maps is CP_Gravel Pit, which leaves TC_Hydro as the last of the original 6 to cover, and boy won't that one be a doozy. But regardless, let's break this map down. Alright, and we are properly in the map. I will provide timestamps for each of the sections I'm going to cover through as I go through from A point to B point to C point. Obviously, with every Team Fortress 2 map, I usually start from either the attacker's side or usually from red side. Here we're going to be starting from blue spawn, but obviously I'll have a cutoff between here and the A point. Now, starting off, to our right, we have this door texture here. Pretty innocuous at the start, but cutting through, as you can see, the door texture would not really match with the outside of this silo, as it's quite elevated. And not to mention, with this being the only way to get inside of this silo, yeah, there doesn't seem to be any other way to get inside of it. And a common theme that I noticed throughout this map in particular is a lot of really tall buildings that are seemingly hollow. Like, this entire building of Blue Spawn is really tall, despite how little there's actually inside of it. So that is just a constant theme throughout each of the respective points. And then immediately to the left here, we have this open shed thing that doesn't seem to have any other entryway but here. But this particular shed is kind of a recurring thing also, because there's also a variety of these, like, I don't know what you would call them, open sheds or open closets with no door texture. This one in particular does not have a ramp, unlike the other ones, but yeah. This is the only way to get inside. And with that, that is about it for the blue spawn. Alright, and now we will transition into A point properly, along with the flanks that comprise of it. Now, starting off from the left here, this area might be a little bit familiar to those who watch the Meet the Team clips. And seeing as I brought up the Meet the Soldier clip in the last map I covered, I figured I'd mention the Meet the Demo Man clip, since most of that vid takes place on here. Now, there's a sequence where the red Demo Man runs out from a series of explosions, and obviously, you know, with that, there's a little bit of more nuance, like ambiguity to the idea that maybe he's, you know, running away like defensively, but you could also make an argument that he's going for the offensive, which is kind of incongruous with the fact that he's on the red team. And there will be another example of this in said Meet the Demo Man clip that I'll bring up later, but just something to bring up. That's all to say about this particular flank. And then immediately we come across, as I mentioned, the open shed closet thing that seems to be plattered throughout. There's another one over there as well. And I have no idea what these would have initially served, given their size and just the vague openness of them. And then alongside this stretch, we have these fencing that is surprisingly cohesive, although there are a few small nuances and issues with it. But this fencing would make sense in terms of trying to block out what is a gravel pit, because obviously the map is called Gravel Pit. You know, the water is wet, the sky is blue, and all that kind of jazz. So this fencing would make sense to keep people from going into the gravel pit in of itself. Now, there was a few nuances with the fencing that I mentioned have a few issues. Like, for example, we have these light poles that are completely offset from the post that they're supposed to be on. And this is clearly not supposed to be the case. And I don't know if it's because, like, maybe when they were making the map, they didn't quite have the, but the hammer units for moving the item would make it so that it would be offset either way. But clearly it's not the case with here, although it is slightly offset. It's not completely offset like that. And then additionally, part of this barbed wire fencing just completely clips into this tower thing here, as you can see. And then speaking of the tower, as I mentioned, basically every major point in Gravel Pit is really top heavy with seemingly no way to get inside or up to it, and are extremely hollow, with a point in particular being extremely hollow on the inside and, you know, essentially being weighed down by this radio tower, which obviously is, as you can see, fake. It's a entity, or not an entity, but it's part of the skybox. It's not actually a prop on the map. It just gives you the illusion that it's a part of the map, as you can tell from here. And then we will go back down because we have another one of these open sheds, although this one's kind of like a tunnel. It's like a small tunnel, and this one's equally confusing because of the fact that it's open both ways with a ramp here. Again, no idea what this would have served. And then we will go back a little bit of the ways because going into more about the skybox and out of bounds, we have this little section where we see these pipes and these little wood boards, but this out of bounds is not it's not coherent with the out of bounds in the blue spawn. And what I mean is, like, we have these small little piles here, but they disappear the moment that we go into the blue spawn section. And this is somewhat consistent throughout some of the other sections that we'll go into later, where some of the out of bounds does not align with the other out of bounds. And obviously this is just for the sake of trying to keep particular assets from loading in all at once, because obviously why would you load in something that you can't see? But as a consequence, as you can see, parts of the skybox do not align with this. And then as a result, the pipes that are in the out of bounds kind of just taper off. Like, they don't go anywhere. They just randomly end from point to point on both sides of the out of bounds regarding A. And then one more thing to comment before we go to B point, because this is the flank from A to B, is we have this small mining shaft, which is surprisingly cohesive. You know, you got enough supports here, you got lanterns, a few mining tools over here and whatnot. There's not really anything out of the ordinary here. And then with that, we will transition to talking about B point. Alright, and now we are into B point. Before we tackle the opening flank for blue, to the left here is our good old friend, the open doorway shed with a ramp. And it also has a window too, which is interesting for something that might have been something for storage or whatnot, to have a window here. And then going back into the area that blue will usually flush out from, we have this particular vent texture. And this one is interesting because it would be venting nothing, because out the other end is supposedly a bunch of rocks or what have you. So what the hell is this even venting? Presumably nothing. More than likely nothing. And then to the right of this flank is another little asset that I find kind of comical. We have this sign that says, "Keep this doorway clear," which I find comical because is this supposed to be a doorway? Because it just seems like this open chute tunnel that you just, like, seemingly drop down from. Like, I have no idea what this would have served initially, beyond just being some kind of service tunnel with seemingly no way to get up other than, like, rocket jumping or what have you. So I just find that sign a little bit funny in essence. And then obviously we have these weird wooden struts that are kind of coming out from the ground. And again, no idea what these are here for. Obviously, for the sake of gameplay, they are just here for the sake of keeping, like, really open line of sights for snipers in particular, because there are some pretty nasty line of sights, like this, for example. But yeah, these are obviously just here for the sake of gameplay. There's no practical reason for them to be here. And then, going back up here, as I mentioned again, that the out of bounds for B do not coincide with the out of bounds into the blue spawn. Again, Skybox has these more gravel pits, but obviously if I move into the blue spawn, it's supposed to be not gravel pits, but piping here. And there's a very noticeable conflict here between. And then speaking more of the out of bounds, we have this railway with a set of telephone wires. I think these are telephone wires, because I think a lot of telephone wires would trace alongside railway carts, at least back during the the opening years of the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the phone. But anyway, we have these telephone wires that will jut out into nothing. They don't even bother to have another telephone pole here and then have the wires kind of just fade out into the skybox. And you can, I'm pretty sure, yeah, you can clearly see that within the game bounds. So this is not even something you can excuse as an out of bounds thing. And then more to the point about out of bounds, we have the railway for this train. And as you can see, there's a small little gap where the railway doesn't connect. But the reason that this doesn't connect is because this little line here is to indicate the line between the skybox and the actual out-of-bounds geometry. If I go past this line, this doesn't exist. And I guess they hadn't really the thought of mind to continue the railway past this point, because obviously this doesn't exist in essence. It's only exists as see if I can try to find it. Yeah, it only exists over here. If I was to run in and then find the railway texture, where would it be relative to here? Yeah, right here. You can see the actual railway texture is really small in comparison. Anyway, we'll go back to the map proper. Into B point itself, like with A, it is extremely top heavy with a lot of hollowness, especially with B kind of being this kind of stomping ground where you can kind of camp up here onto the rafters and roofs and shoot down into the point itself. So obviously they had to make some concessions to make this area particularly hollow, but as a result, there's a little bit of structural integrity problems, particularly with this weird, I forget what this is called. I don't know if this is also a radio or a satellite scanner. And then this thing here, I forget what this is called, but I've seen these as well, and they're also for radios or whatnot. And then more to the point about this tower being hollow, we have this pipe chute that goes down here and kind of ends here. So the implication is that this chute kind of just pukes out into the middle of this hall like this, which I don't think that's supposed to be the idea, but they're just kind of going for the more industrial style of this point, so they probably didn't really have the presence of mind to consider where this would fall out into in this manner. And then the remainder of B point is kind of a procession of ledges and ramps and railways that do not have any railings to them. So people are going to fall and get hurt. And the ironic thing about the lack of railings along here is we have this sign here that says, "Watch your step." Because it's they know people are going to fall and hurt themselves because of the lack of railings. It's just multiple OSHA violations just happening, just screaming into my head when I see these ramps like this. And obviously they're just here for the sake of cohesiveness for gameplay. You don't want too many noisy textures, but you also don't want players to be too constrained. Obviously you have to keep particular constraints, but there's a fair similitude between constraints within the playable space and constraints within that playable space, if that makes any sense to you, if I'm not speaking complete gibberish. But yeah, That's obviously why they don't have like railings for ramps or ledges like this, because some players do want to just drop down if they feel like it. And then with that, we will transition to talking about C points, starting from the point of A. Alright, and now we will be discussing C points, starting with the flank from A to C. Now, another notable thing, since I was going to bring it up again, in the Meet the Demoman clip, is the Red Demoman, he kind of leads the entire blue team on this, like, goose chase to him, to this doorway where he blows them all up with an array of stickies. But with him being the blue Demoman, he is leading blue team away from C point, when in any other like normal circumstance when it comes to gameplay, the blue team would be attacking C point. So it kind of makes me wonder if when they were making the Meet the Team clips, that they kind of had it in their heads that, oh, maybe sometimes a red team would attack this point. Whereas, where it is normally where, when it comes to any map in Team Fortress 2 that is strictly attack defend, red team is always defending and blue is always attacking. And this is also the case with payload. And I think this was just something that became the norm. But maybe back then they kind of had in their heads, oh, well, maybe red team can sometimes attack, and blue team can sometimes defend, because that would be the only way that would make sense in that clip. But that was just another thing that I thought was particularly noteworthy about that clip, in conjunction with like how red and blue team actually operate in game. Now we can actually talk about the textures in the game. Now, I believe... Oh, yeah. So, again, we have another keep this doorway clear sign here in an area that does not look like a doorway. Just seems like an open hall. So, again, not sure why that's here. And then over here, we have another one of these vents that would be venting nothing, because on the other side is just more rock. So it's not venting anything, and I'm pretty sure there's a series of vents that do basically that. This one might be venting something, since this is just complete out of bounds, so it's kind of, you know, it's kind of open to interpretation. And then over here into this small ledge and stairway is the actual presence of rails. But these rails are very odd, because the rails here don't complete onto the side of this ledge, but we have rails that go into the stairway when you don't need rails here, because the stairway is already beset by the side of the ledge and this wall here. So not sure why this particular asset has railings here. It makes me think this is like an earlier design that they went for and kind of just left it here when they decided to opt out of having rails. That's my guess anyway, as to why that's the case. And then speaking about the out of bounds again, since I'm going to be talking about the B flank into C, is the out of bounds between A and C is not cohesive, as you can tell. Again, there's a conflict. But the out of bounds between B and C is somewhat cohesive. As you can see, like, aspects of it do carry over if I move from B to C. As you can see, it's not like it's not a completely different set of buildings or whatnot, as you can tell. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they couldn't keep it consistent between A and C, but they were able to keep it consistent between B and C. And then regarding the flank from B to C, we have a... Let's see if I can try to find it. Okay, so we have this door texture that is out of bounds. That would be, I believe, colliding with a set of walls here. And then there's another door texture. Yeah, this door texture in particular would be colliding with this fencing here in the out of bounds. So this would not coincide in the slightest. And then additionally, do you find it a little strange that the B flanks into C are kind of split like this. Like, they're split in these, like, really two thin buildings between one another, side by side. And there doesn't seem to be any way to gain access to either side beyond the long way around. There's no doors or anything like that, which I find a little bit odd. And then in particular with this flank, immediately going back before we go out into C point, is our old friend, the upraised shelving covered with mesh. This seems to be a thing that Team Fortress 2 really likes when it comes to assets in the game. 2.4 had it, Dust Bowl had it, I'm pretty sure Granary probably had it here and there. It's just, they really like this particular asset for whatever reason. And now we can actually go into C point proper. Now, into the pass out from the A flank, we have more of these wooden struts that are seemingly here just for the sake of blocking a long line of sight. And additionally, we have this strut that seems to only be very slightly embedded into the ground. So I feel like realistically, this thing would have fallen off or be leaning out, because of just how little is actually paved into the ground this way. Obviously, they're not paved particularly well. As you can see, they kind of just, like, arbitrarily and randomly taper around, as opposed to, like how struts would probably, like, dig into the ground this way. But, of course, that's besides the point. This is a 2007 game. Like, they weren't, like, completely realistic that you would excuse this as like live leak footage or something like that. But yeah, that's besides the point. And then out from the pass, we have another one of these sheds, but this shed is interesting because it is completely closed off with a door, and for some reason no ramp to it. It's just got this random ledge, like it's slightly upraised for some reason. I don't know why it would be upraised with like no like easy means of access from here. So that's funny. And then more into the out of bounds, we have another set of telephone wires. And if we go out, as you can see, they eventually just kind of give up. They just cut off and don't even try to continue into the other telephone poles. But again, as you can see, the rest of these telephone poles do not exist. So that's why they cut off like this. But it's still kind of interesting that they could have like still had telephone wires jut out alongside the skybox poles, rather than just having poles with no telephone wires. So they're basically just poles for the sake of being poles. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then we will discuss C Tower itself. And the whole entire makeup of the C Tower kind of reminds me of a beta version, or like an earlier version of the High Tower because of just how like consistently it winds like this. Like that's what it reminds me of in a way. Or it kind of reminds me of, I don't remember if there was a map in Halo that kind of had a similar mock-up with the way it would wind into the middle and then out through the top, like elevate this way. But more to the point about the tower, like with B and A tower, this tower again is extremely top heavy with how seemingly hollow and useless it is beyond the point of having a capture point. Beyond just holding this giant laser, you know, whatever you want to call it. I also kind of find it funny that the laser has like a small ladder and these like support railings, as to like implies somebody would go up here and inspect it when there's seemingly no way to get up here practically. So I thought that's kind of funny. And then as for the laser, we have these series of cords that kind of go into this socket, but the socket on the other end goes to nowhere. So I have no idea what this laser is being powered by. Like, it could be powered by like absolutely nothing. for all I know. It's like renewable energy. It's like taking, it's like the power of the sun in the palm of my hand or something like that when it comes to this laser. So I thought that's kind of funny in a way. And then the remainder of what to discuss is mainly to do with the red spawn. Now, to the right of the red spawn, we have this series of double doors into this shed. But on the other side is another shed door, a single shed door. And this would not coincide with this unless we are to believe that there's like two different sheds that are just smack dab side by side between one another for this to make sense. And then as for red spawn itself, there's not really anything out of the ordinary. It's kind of what you would expect from the other spawns in the other games. But what I find funny, and possibly just a consistency with the design of TF2 at the time, is they are a real big fan of really big buildings that are like hollow from the inside. Like, you have windows that are just way above from any like reasonable height. You have like dust fans here above reasonable height, and seemingly no way to access them, and just like it's like they wanted to really exaggerate the scale of these buildings to give them a more larger than life purpose, when this entire like building is just a facade and the actual inside of it is much smaller than what it actually is. It's kind of like some of the out of bounds in the I think it was CP Well, I believe, that had that same thing where like the area that you supposedly traverse to seems to be much larger than what it actually is, and it's like much smaller in comparison. And with that, that is it for CP_Gravel Pit. And that is it for that map, and as far as I know, any immediate upcoming Odd Architecture maps in future. I'm not sure what I have planned for the remainder of this year, and more than likely, I will be divesting a bit into more photography and poetry that I'm off to do until the new year starts. Hope you've liked the output of these videos regardless.